Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to English Night. My name is Steve Ferrucci. I'm the chair of the English department. We have a lot to celebrate tonight, so we're just going to get right to it. First, though, it takes a lot of work to put together English Night, believe it or not, and none of it would be possible without Miranda Lau, the department's administrative assistant. So, without Miranda, the English department would just devolve into a Darwinian kind of free-for-all, so we're very grateful to have her. We also have 4 student workers who help us throughout the year: Melody Lacombe, Phoebe Gettyman, Sarah Leduc, and Sarah Burnett. And both Melody and Phoebe will be leaving us this year, so we're very sad about that, and we'll miss them. But thanks to them, too. I don't know if any of you are here. I don't think so. But we're going to clap anyway, because they will feel the love wherever they are. Okay, we have several awards to give tonight, and you can read about them in your program. I'm going to invite the awardees to come up to the podium when your name is called, and then stand here awkwardly while I read good things about you. And then, as a bonus, you and I will stand together for an awkward photo, and we'll just kind of go with it. Friends and family are welcome to come up and take photos and make it even more awkward, and kind of stretch it out. So feel free. Right? All right, so our first award tonight is for service to the department, and this year's recipient is Marcus Grant. Right. Yeah, good. Is that good? Awkward?
Yeah.
All right, good. All right, I'm going to read nice and slow.
Oh, great.
Mark served on the Dean of Arts and Sciences Student Advisory Council as a student member of the English Department's Recruitment and Publicity Committee, as a writer for University Relations, as the Sigma Tau Delta Treasurer, and as a tutor in the Writing Center. Whenever the department needs student participation, whether it's working alongside faculty at an open house or lugging books from one point to another for a Sigma Tau Delta book sale, Mark can be counted on. So congratulations, Mark.
Tom, how should we stand?
We have a fancy certificate, and we're going to come over here, and a selection of
Should we be
books.
holding these?
And then we'll figure it out. Yep. The next award tonight is for lifelong learning, and this year's recipient is Anna Miller. Anna, I think you're here. Yep, good. The faculty member who nominated Anna had this to say about her. Anna is an essential leader in class discussion, but she's also impressed me outside of class. She pops by my office to talk about our readings and to request my shadow reading list, all the things I'd love to be teaching in the course but couldn't. Her intellectual curiosity is boundless, and her enthusiasm is palpable. We're very fortunate that her circuitous path in higher education led her to us. Congratulations, Anna. Our next award tonight is for contributions to the cultural life of the campus, and the recipient is Samantha Vertucci. Samantha, come on up. One faculty member who nominated her writes, Sammy has been an exemplary president of the Creative Writing Club this year. She has hosted monthly coffee houses, providing an outlet for Eastern students, musicians, and singers. In addition, she has held weekly creative writing workshops at which she has cultivated a supportive, nurturing environment where writers are encouraged to take risks and discover the power of their voices and their stories. She has also taken the lead in editing this year's issue of Eastern Exposure, which will be one of the very best. It would not have been possible without Sammy. Congratulations, Sammy. Our fourth award tonight is for excellence in teaching or tutoring, and this year's recipient is Ava Glazer. One faculty member notes of Ava that she is one of the top 5 tutors I have worked with in the 25 years that I've been teaching that class. From the beginning, she was quick to understand the goals I had set for each major assignment, and her instincts about how to best help a particular student move forward are always on the mark. Congratulations, Ava. Ava's going to stand right there because she likes the attention. Our next award is for an outstanding future educator, and this year's recipient is Ava Glazer. A faculty member who nominated her notes that I've seen Ava teach, so I know why a few weeks after meeting her, the middle school teacher who served as her mentor at her first clinical placement was ready to hand over control of her classroom as often as Ava wanted it. By the end of the semester, her mentor teacher had already requested she return next year. Ava is poised, confident, compassionate, intelligent, creative, intuitive. She genuinely has every trait one could want in a future English teacher. Congratulations, Ava. All right, our final award tonight is for academic excellence. Please welcome back Marcus Grant. One faculty member who nominated Mark had this to say: frankly, Mark's CV speaks for itself. He has given 5 conference presentations, published 2 scholarly articles in the undergraduate research journal Metamorphosis, and published short fiction in Eastern Exposure. He participated in both our Summer Research Institute and the prestigious Rutgers English Diversity Institute, which accepts only 15 students nationwide from among juniors, seniors, and recent alums. It's huge. He won the Library Undergraduate Research Award last year as well. He also, I might add, just won the President's Award at CREATE just 2 weeks ago, or last week, or whenever it was. Yeah, great. So congratulations again, Mark. So congratulations again to all of you. Good work this year. Before we break, I'd like to tell you a story. In the early 1960s, a star descended from the firmament and landed somewhere in the upper Midwest. This star grew up a punk and new wave rocker destined for rhetorical greatness. Incurring substantial debt to follow her dream, she worshiped at the Packers' altar and became an almost lifelong U2 fan until their shady business practices became too much, even for Bono's self-righteousness. She landed here at Eastern in the late 1990s and immediately changed the English department for the better, creating a first-year writing program that was held up by the state as a model for how developmental writing should be taught. She helped design the LAC, was the first coordinator of the liberal studies major, and was the second best English department chair ever. I'll leave it to you to decide who's the best. Her scholarship has examined how faith functions rhetorically in secular and religious texts, and how individuals suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome articulated their concerns despite institutional refusal to acknowledge that condition. She is a fantastic teacher, a supportive colleague who never, ever, ever interrupts. And a good friend. We will miss her, Please join me in thanking Dr. Barbara Liu, who's retiring this semester. Barbara. Okay. Now I'm going to go cry. Barbara's already crying, right? So it's time for refreshments, except if you are an award winner, you get to come back up here and get a group photo. Everyone else can go, please enjoy refreshments. We'll take about 20, 25 minutes or so. Please go over and take a look at the poster presentations and talk to the folks who did the research there. Otherwise, mingle, enjoy yourselves, and I'll reconvene us in about 25 minutes or so. All right, thank you. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and reconvene. Please grab something to eat and come rushing to your seat. This is I guess the best part for me is because I simply get to invite Dr. Maureen McDonald to come up to the podium and introduce the scholars from her seminar, Disability Demands a Story, Extraordinary Bodies in Literature. So, Dr. McDonald?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Maureen McDonald, and I'm part of Eastern's English department. Very pleased to welcome you here and to acknowledge our students and Ms. Miranda Lau and the department staff for all the work that they did in creating tonight's community event. I also want to thank those in the audience who supported all the students here tonight. Behind the scenes, in upfront ways, I really appreciate the ways that you show up for the people that matter to you, and thank you for that. Tonight, we celebrate the accomplishments of our majors, including those finishing their senior seminar. The seminar theme, Disability Demands a Story, Extraordinary Bodies in Literature, asks students to consider the stories we've inherited about disability. What are the ways that disability can invite creative practice and political coalition? Throughout this past year, I've worked with writers who have explored issues of representation, bias, and care, and then went and began to write their way out through projects that they found meaningful to them. The writers in our class undertook a number of creative and academic projects. Their abstracts can give you a chance to glimpse their priorities. And in the tradition of Audre Lorde, who reminded us that without community, there is no liberation, let me introduce our community. My writers are Haley Walden, Sammy Sheldon, Sam Pine, Jordan Navarro, Danielle Murphy, Caroline Mullen, Liz Maldonado, Jonelle Joni, Megan Hurley, Savannah Eldridge, Alize Dowell, Bridget Crowley, Jenna Chernusky, Kendall Chernowski, and Emma Basilata. That group has selected 3 writers to represent our class, and they will take all the questions, comments, conversations after all 3 have presented. And our first writer will be Emma Basilata. She'll present part of her capstone entitled Crippled Bastards, Trauma, Response, and Disability in Fantasy Literature. Please join me in welcoming Emma.
Ooh, thank you, Dr. McDonald. I have slides. Let's see. And my font is gone. Sorry to disappoint. I did have a cool font. Yes, my capstone's titled Crippled Bastards, Trauma, Response, and Disability in Fantasy Literature. And the QR code down here on the right is for a transcript. If you want to read everything I'm saying in verbatim, feel free to scan that. It'll be on the next slide as well. My capstone looks at 2 series, Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings and Joe Abercrombie's First Law trilogy. And it explores the fantasy subgenre and how these contents can play into the very serious and nuanced conversation around disability in modern society. And while my analysis is based in fiction, I believe the stories in both of these series can open the door to the conversation around disabled heroes, villains, victims, and veterans. So I'll be looking at 2 different characters today. The first character I'll be looking at is Fitz, who is the main character of Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings. He is a war hero turned assassin, and he developed his disabilities while he was unjustly imprisoned and tortured by the government. All of Fitz's disabilities are invisible. He has epilepsy, chronic pain, migraines, and a few others. During the torture that began most of his chronic pain, he also developed a white streak in his hair, which you can see in his photo. As he is physically and mentally recovering from the trauma of torture, he says, I watched the hair grow in white above I watched the hair grow in white above my brow where my scalp had been split. I refuse to think about it, but no man could come through torture unchanged. Hobb uses Fitz's white streak not only to make him identifiable by the government that tortured him, but also to turn his invisible disabilities visible. Hobb utilizes the scholarly idea popularized by Elaine Scarry in her novel, The Body in Pain, who writes, if the felt attributes of pain are lifted into the visible world, then the sentient fact of a person's suffering will become knowable to a second person. Hobb applies this theory to Fitz's white streak to make his existence as a disabled person easier for the reader and the ableist society around Fitz to understand. This white streak becomes a constant reminder of Fitz's chronic pain, and Scarry expands on this ideology through her nail in the foot theory. The example being that pain cannot just be described as pain, but wounded people must use an allegory for the unwounded to understand. Hence, a pain in the foot cannot just be a sharp pain, but it must be made tangible by saying it feels as if there's a nail in the foot. Here, a disabled person is required to explain their body-mind, which is an idea made by Margaret Price that the body and mind work together to create a person. Using a physical and tangible simile to make a non-disabled person understand an invisible disability. When applied to Scarry's scholarship, Fitz's white streak makes his disabilities hyper-visible to the able-bodied characters of the novel as well as the reader. The white streak in Fitz's hair not only becomes symbolic of his invisible disabilities, but it also becomes the way others identify him as a believed murderer and traitor. After he escapes years of the government's abuse, he spends 15 years living in the woods. There, he takes on a new persona called Tom Badgerlock, which is inspired by his white streak. During this time, he tells people that his white streak was something he was born with as a strategy to avoid further questioning. But in these 15 years, he accepts his white streak as a part of him, signifying him accepting his invisible disabilities. But still, he continues to fear that people will identify him based on his marker. Here, Fitz is forced to assimilate his disabilities into the idea that all disabled people must justify their disabilities in a way the superstructure can understand. And he is forced to become multiple different versions to appease the able-bodied society's vision of what a disabled person looks like. And as much as I want to keep talking about Fitz, I am on a time limit, and I'm talking about 2 characters. So if you want to read more, I have a 25-page capstone you can read. The next character I'll be talking about is Sandon Glokta, and he is the main character of Joe Abercrombie's First Law trilogy. He is a war hero, and similar to Fitz, he's a war hero and a hostage of war turned torturer. But unlike Fitz, he has visible disabilities, some of which you can see pictured. He is also a cane user. And something interesting is that disability and trauma and mental illness are often separated in modern scholarship, and plenty of scholars argue that disability and trauma should be kept separate, as the fields are too unrelated. But characters like Glokta prove that the distinction between mental illness and disability is flawed, and that there's often a comorbidity both on the page and in real life. While Glokta searches for the revenge for being tortured, he detaches his present body-mind from his past body-mind as a form of mental preservation. Reflecting on his own life before the war and before the torture, he says his memories are the memories of another man, a dead man. My life began in prisons. Wherever did my past self go? He's dead. He died. Glokta not only hates his present and disabled body-mind, but he perceives the disabled version of himself to be the only version that ever existed. He uses dissonance as a coping mechanism for his acquired disabilities, displaying strong signs of PTSD. Once again, we return to Elaine Scarry's novel, The Body in Pain. And she explores how individual suffering can relate to the social and political structures, and how the psychological relationship of the torturer and prisoner work. Looking at the First Law series through Scarry's lens offers a unique perspective, as Glokta has survived as both prisoner and torturer. Scarry claimed the prisoner's sentience destroys his world, so now the absence of the world, or his confession, destroys his claims of sentience. The confession which displays the fact that he has nothing to live for now obscures the fact that he is violently alive. Glokta mentally never leaves the dungeons he was tortured in, and he still subconsciously believes himself to be the prisoner and all his superiors the torturer. Using Scarry's theory, his confession would be the belief that he died in the dungeons. That narrative sparks Glokta's constant drive for revenge. However, his role as torturer is not as black and white as one might think. Scarry argues, for the prisoner, the body and its pain are overwhelmingly present, and the voice, world, and self are absent. For the torturer, voice, world, and self are overwhelmingly present, and body and pain are absent. We see her sense of how the role of torturer and prisoner affects the body-mind. Glokta, in his effort to leave his pain behind, tries to shift to being the torturer from prisoner. However, he freezes in stasis and becomes a mix of both prisoner and torturer. Sorry. While trying to convince himself that he is no longer the war hero he was, he subconsciously combines all the post-war forms of himself, both prisoner and torturer. Yet because he cannot accept his disabilities, he can neither accept either role. In fact, Glokta acknowledges this, his own entrapment, saying, 8 years since the torturer released me, and yet I am still their prisoner, and always will be, trapped in a cell no bigger than my own crippled body. He associates his disabilities with his torture, and he never mentally accepted his survival. Hence, he cannot emotionally live with his disabled body-mind. To conclude, with his invisible disabilities, Fitz thinks of himself as more than one person. Problematically, he is forced into being multiple versions of himself to fit into what society's fantasies about disabled people look like. Oppositely, Glokta cannot fathom himself as being more than one person. In his narrative, ableism requires his visible disabilities to frame him as a villain. In both of their societies, ableism is socially prominent and dominant, yet it affects each character in polar opposite ways. However, both Fitz and Glokta are victims, perceived as villains, and as that's what the superstructure has made them. I'd like to offer you 2 more fan depictions of Fitz and Glokta, who have survived under the exact same circumstances, are the exact same age, and of the same gender. Notice how they are differently depicted. Fitz being, pretty handsome, good-looking guy, and Glokta his equal in many ways, but with invisible disabilities. There's this problematic representation in what makes a disabled person look disabled. So now you're saying, Emma, who cares? What does any of this mean? I don't know these series, I don't know these characters, but that's where you'd be wrong because you do know these characters. Fitz and Glokta are founded off of years of harmful stereotypes and the idea of the evil cripple, whose disabilities must have an emotional and physical manifestation. I hope with some of my capstone you can see that the genres, shows, and TV that you have loved for your whole life may be more than simple entertainment and can offer a nuanced look at disability. Media you've enjoyed since childhood like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and Game of Thrones all feature disabled characters who might be more than just disabled for evil's sake. And perhaps the next time when you're rewatching Star Wars, you might wonder if Darth Vader's suit is just scary or whether it is both armor and life support for a paraplegic. I invite you all to question the media that's been presented to you and not settle for a harmful or stereotypical representation. I invite you all to question who you were raised to believe as villainous, monstrous, or repulsive. And as always, I invite you to ask questions rather than pass judgments. Thank you. And I'm passing off the mic to my peer, Megan Hurley, and her capstone, Who is to Blame for the Lack of Equity in Classrooms, an exploration of ableism in the education system. Give it up for Megan.
For my capstone project, I explore the question, who is to blame for the lack of equity in classrooms? This guiding question shapes my research of ableism in education. As a future teacher pursuing a career in early childhood education, I am passionate about creating an inclusive classroom and offering an equitable education to all students. My research confronts the adverse effects of barriers in place for students with disabilities. These detrimental consequences prevent students from receiving a fair education. My work brings awareness to the necessity of an equitable education while simultaneously exposing the adverse effects of the inherent ableism in the United States school systems. To begin, I address the importance of education as a whole. I argue that learning opportunities in school go beyond academics, and the social, emotional, and developmental gains are equally significant. American author Robert Fulghum argues this idea in his book of reflective essays, the first titled Deep Kindergarten. In his essay, Fulghum claims, "We are sent to school to be civilized, to be introduced to the essential machinery of human society." He supports his claim explaining that in kindergarten, children are taught the fundamentals on which civilization rests. While Fulghum's piece mainly explores opinion-based claims, these opinions drove my research. Like him, I believe the developmental gains that occur during this time are irreplicable. Elementary education offers the unique opportunity for students to foster their friendships, to develop self-awareness, And it is these skills that guide children in understanding themselves and their worth and value in society. Now to address some key terms and concepts I will be using throughout my work. The Americans with Disabilities Act is a civil rights law that protects individuals with disabilities from discrimination in all places. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is an educational law that makes free, appropriate public education available to students with disabilities. Disability looks different for everyone. However, as defined under the Americans with Disabilities Act, a person with a disability is a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And finally, ableism is a set of beliefs or practices that devalue and discriminate against people with disabilities and often rests on the assumption that disabled people need to be fixed. Now, with these concepts in mind, consider a news report from the Greenwich Times. The article discussed at a recent PTA meeting where a plan was proposed that claimed the town would need over $34 million to get the school up to the standard of the ADA. Stephanie Cowie, who was a member for the Committee of People with Disabilities in Greenwich, states, "This is the bare bones minimum of ADA we are talking about. Priorities of entering the school in a safe manner, utilizing facilities, and getting into classrooms. You're talking about the basics." With the emphasis on basic needs of students not being met, I conclude that the majority of society was not physically constructed with concern for individuals with disabilities, particularly within the education system. Another statement was taken from PTA President John Fisher. Fisher states, "Getting all the schools up to the ADA standards is far better value for everyone than to pay litigation and settlements." Fisher's point may be valid from a financial standpoint. However, I argue that Fisher is enforcing an ableist agenda. He places clear emphasis on the financial and social burden that litigation would cause the school, neglecting the burden that would be lifted off of students with disabilities if these renovations were to be made. Next, I analyze an additional news article following the story of a student who was deaf, Miguel Luna Perez. Under the IDEA, Perez had legal accommodations for American Sign Language translators to be present in his classrooms. However, Perez claims the translators were either not fluent in ASL or were not present in the classroom at all. Perez's accommodations were neglected for years because the school failed to truthfully communicate with Perez's family. To their surprise, in his senior year of high school, Perez was informed that he did not meet all of his graduation requirements, which led Perez and his family to sue under both the IDEA and the ADA. Perez's lawyers told the court that for 12 years, the school system neglected the boy and lied to his parents regarding the progress he was making, which permanently stunted his ability to communicate. Ultimately, Perez's case was brought to the Supreme Court, where it was ruled in favor of Perez. He received financial compensation, and the school district had to fund his education at the Michigan School for the Deaf. Since he was financially compensated, some may argue that Perez got the justice he deserves. However, I do not believe that Perez was adequately compensated for the extent of the negligence he faced. As I stated, I believe school is about more than just academics. Perez missed out on a vital time in his life that he will never get back. No amount of money or classes can make up for the skills and experiences he missed out on. The lies Perez's parents coupled with the continual neglect resulted in permanent damage to Perez's communication skills, clearly demonstrating lifelong ill effects of ableism due to the direct negligence of teachers. I would now like to briefly discuss a story shared by Tonya Crystal, a neurodivergent woman with cerebral palsy. She uses an online platform to advocate for herself and shares her experience growing up in the education system with a disability. Crystal shares a story about a time she was humiliated during a spelling test. During the test, her teacher said aloud, "The next spelling word is different. Tonya is different from everyone else because she uses a walker." When reflecting on this moment, Crystal states, "Because of experiences like these, which are not rare for people with disabilities, I question, even now, whether people's motives are genuine when they do or say something nice." Though she was physically present in the classroom, Tonya Crystal was excluded from the majority of her peers largely due to her teachers constantly reinforcing ableist stereotypes upon her. Because of this, she missed out on social and emotional experiences which ultimately ties back to Fulgram's claims, that being that the early years in education have lasting impacts on social and emotional development. To offer one final example, I present this photo. Surely, the little boy in the green shirt on the right will stand out to you, as he is in a wheelchair and is not integrated into the class photograph. Now you may consider, since he's in a wheelchair, then perhaps this setup was the only way to take the photo, which emphasizes the physical effects of the barriers in place for students with disabilities. However, I now offer this photograph. This is a photograph of the very same class, the very same year. The only difference is that the students are equally integrated into the group. The photo was retaken at the request of the boy's parents, as they were disheartened and upset to see their son so obviously marginalized. The parents asked the child be picked up and placed on the bench with his peers. Clearly an easy solution. However, the teachers and staff did not initially see a problem. The parents' intervention was what guided this change, making these images examples of the physical barriers in schools, as well as displaying teachers who neglect their position and job in the classroom. By not searching for a method to fully accommodate the student, his teachers place additional barriers in front of the child, preventing him from receiving all of the benefits he deserves from school. My research followed the guiding question, who is to blame for the lack of equitable education in the United States? While I do believe that society as a whole is to blame, based on reports such as the physical violations in Greenwich, Connecticut, the ultimate conclusion I have come to is that teachers individually can work to make any environment inclusive. I, of course, am not disregarding the physical barriers in place. However, I am arguing that a teacher has the ability to recognize their privilege in the classroom and use this privilege to provide an inclusive education to students. Disability scholar Shaida Kafai urges those who are privileged in society to recognize this privilege and to humble themselves, and to learn from those who are most marginalized. Through this work, I urge teachers to work towards eradicating ableism, to recognize their privilege, to learn from their students, and to be open to change. Because ultimately, I believe anyone who denies their student an accommodation or makes fun of them during a test has no place in the education system at all. Thank you. Now please join me in welcoming Sam Pine, who will present her project on inspiration porn and its impacts on the disabled body-mind.
Good evening, everyone. My capstone is titled Share If You Disagree, Inspiration Porn's Place in Social Media and Its Impact on Disabled Body Minds. You may ask me, Sam, what is inspiration porn? Not quite this. Not sure what you were thinking there. This is definitely not what I mean either. So, what is inspiration porn then? In simple terms, inspiration porn is a term coined by the late disability rights activist Stella Young, seen there and there, that describes media or stories that overly focus on people with disabilities or challenges, portraying them as inspirational solely based on their disability, rather than as fully realized individuals with their own agency, desires, and complexities. I thought the best way to demonstrate this concept would be by sharing examples of inspiration porn commonly seen on social media and discussing how these posts perpetuate ableism against people with disabilities. But before I do that, I believe it's important to bring to attention some disability justice principles to keep in mind while viewing the following images. Disability justice focuses on how different systems of oppression reinforce each other and how each person has multiple identities that can be a site of privilege or oppression. This is not the full list, but here are just a few. Intersectionality, leadership by those most affected, embracing wholeness, and interdependence. Now, I will show you some fabricated examples crafted in a way that shows common themes within inspiration porn. Let's get started. So let's take a look at Instagram. A young child is seen on the left with a smile on their face, wearing a flannel shirt. On the right, the text reads, "Sometimes angels are disguised as kids with special needs to teach us how to be better people." This image uses a child with a disability to try to make non-disabled people feel better. It uses the appeal of a cute child and portrays disability as something innocent. This ignores the challenges faced by people with disabilities and makes it seem like their purpose is only to inspire others. The child is just a human being, don't forget that, not some sort of angelic, otherworldly being. That is the power of inspiration porn, erasing the reality of a person with a disability to encourage able-bodied people to feel good about themselves. This next image shows a tweet from @ChronicAlleyAwesome with no profile picture. The tweet reads, "Wow, this girl's autistic and drew such beautiful artwork of her mother. How inspiring. Click and share our link with your friends and family." You'll see the link. Below the link, there is an image of a smiling girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. I'll admit, this one is a bit different, but stick with me. This tweet focuses solely on a woman's autism and her artwork, turning her into an object of inspiration. The post focuses on the appeal of the artwork to evoke an emotional response, but it overlooks her individuality, history, and the artwork's actual details. This raises an important question. Is her disability the only reason this is supposed to be interesting? Thibodeau Boyden Beckman, 2019, believed that simply showing disabled people fails to educate viewers. In fact, it can reinforce stereotypes if it focuses on inspiration rather than showing the reality of their lives. Just because someone has a disability doesn't mean their story is automatically newsworthy. This last screenshot shows a featured post on Facebook promoting a page users can like. The post reads, "How inspiring! Share on your feed." Below the post, there is an image of a person in a wheelchair on a beach. The text reads, "Never ignore somebody with a disability. You don't realize how much they can inspire you. Share if you agree." The image is paired with a promotion for viewers to like their page, which reads, "Disability Inspiration. Follow our page." Run by a group of allies, Disability Inspiration welcomes posts from everybody who sees, and then there's ellipsis, presumably that goes on. This image, albeit, is the worst example of inspiration porn. It reduces a woman in a wheelchair to a symbol of inspiration, with her outstretched arms and the caption praising her. It doesn't care about her story, just the likes and shares it gets. This image and related text raise a key question. Are people sharing because they genuinely care, or just to show that they're good people? The image ignores the daily struggles of people with disabilities. While the woman at the beach might not feel self-conscious or have any other thoughts in the world, this post assumes her experience defines all disabilities. It tells able-bodied viewers to see the world through her supposedly positive lens, ignoring the reality that many wheelchair users struggle with accessing beaches and accessibility as a whole. So then, what constitutes effective disability representation on social media? I'll say above all else, it's imperative to not talk over those with disabilities. But additionally, you can find things with authenticity, diverse perspectives, education and awareness, and accessibility. These are all helpful ways in which to have effective disability representation on social media. All right. So I won't be playing the video. I know it just popped like it does. I don't have the time for it. Deadline. Let's look at some examples, though. So our first video is about Judy Heumann, pictured there, a disability rights activist and her lifelong fight for equality. In the video, she highlights the societal discrimination faced by disabled people and the importance of the disability rights movement. This post, I'll let you look at it for a moment. This is a video about a woman who was born with no arms and how she lives her essentially like day-to-day life. The poster here saying, "Please don't use us disabled people for your inspiration porn." It's actually really insulting. I note that because these are some comments that were found on that video. The first one says, "Bravo," with 4 clapping hands emojis. The second one says, "Life is wonderful for her and her child. This is great. It gives me the inspiration to be happier with who I am." Smiley face. "Thank you for this happy video." Smiley face. And the last one is, "You are an inspiration." These, both this one and this one, call out people who are unknowingly glorifying disability due to a multitude of factors, whether that be misinformation or just general ignorance. This last image essentially just highlights reminders for Disability Pride Month, talking about how disability is diverse, disability isn't rare, don't have invasive questions. We're celebrating. It's education, and activism, not sympathy. So, as I wrap up, feel free to scan any of the QR cards you see here to learn more about disability studies as a whole. The first one is a compilation of disability justice resources. This is like several different articles on like disability, other resources. It's very plentiful. I recommend that one above all else. The second one are the 10 Principles of Disability Justice, which is what I showed the first 4 of at the beginning. The third, can I count? Accessible Social, which is a platform designed to empower individuals with disabilities by providing inclusive and accessible social networking experiences. The last one is talking about the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act. So, in conclusion, social media has changed how we connect and learn, but with this power comes great responsibility. While platforms have made strides in accessibility, they often fall short in combating misinformation, like inspiration porn. This type of content perpetuates harmful stereotypes about disabled individuals. To address this, we need collective efforts to educate creators and users, promoting positive narratives and inclusivity. By fostering understanding and empathy online, we can create a space where everyone feels valued and supported. Thank you. I now have the overwhelming pleasure to welcome back Emma and Megan to the stage for a nice Q&A session. Please give them another round of applause.
Forgot about this part. Is there any questions?
Any questions?
No pressure. Don't all jump at once. Sammy.
I have a question for you, Megan, about the education. So do you think, you talked about like the kind of onus being on teachers. Do you think that there's like administrative layers to that? Like there's certain different responsibilities that come with a different position in education or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely, and I elaborate more on that in my paper, but I think the main focus that I wanted to present was on teachers, just because I feel like there's so many small things you can do within a classroom that can make a difference. I mean, if you consider the photographs I showed, kind of, if I saw that situation and I was dealing with that, I would want to accommodate that student more so, and I feel like that was the emphasis that I wanted to put on it. So certainly there's definitely things administrators should be doing and could be doing a lot better, but I think that for my personal project, I wanted to put the emphasis on what teachers individually can do. So I think they can make a big difference.
Anyone else?
How do you feel, anyone could answer this, and it'd be like a fun game for y'all to figure out, but how do you feel like you're then going to apply the new lens that you have on access for folks with disability into like your future schooling or job?
I mean, thinking about, Megan and I are going to be joking.
Sorry.
Thinking about seeing like the world through this like disability lens that we maybe only scratched the surface of in like our education classes and through our own lived experiences. It's incredibly like eye-opening just to realize like how much we, or able-bodied people, take for granted that those with disabilities are not privy to or have the opportunity to feel the same lived experiences that we do. And as an educator, it's very important to make sure you are talking to the whole, like all students, not just specific ones. Everyone should have the right and has the right to be included and incorporated within a lesson or a class or throughout the school as a whole.
I'd like to expand on that. I'm going to be a librarian, so similar, but yeah, thank you. yeah, librarian. Anyway, but I think libraries offer a lot, and in terms of accessibility, especially in Connecticut, they're trying to decrease funding for ebooks and audiobooks for libraries. So yeah, boo. I feel like in my future career, I would like to promote the accessibility and offer different ways of learning to people in the public community.
This is not a question, it's just a word of praise. I'm going to be presenting at a conference in May, and I got an email today from the conference organizers with a link to some guidelines for accessibility and presentation. And I read that over, and I was reworking my PowerPoint this afternoon, et cetera. And I just want to say, you three have perfectly demonstrated how to make a presentation accessible. You know, Emma with your QR code so people could read the transcript, describing the images, reading everything that was up there, and so on and so forth. So kudos for kind of walking the walk that you're talking in terms of presenting in an accessible way.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think we'll take our leave.
Can I just say that English majors are just really smart? Can we just, let's just put that out there, right? So, really. All right. So congratulations again to all the award winners and to Dr. Liu, of course, and the presenters tonight, both up here and on the poster presentations as well. And congratulations to anybody who is graduating. Anybody here graduating? Yes? Well done, right? Just a couple of final announcements. There is an after party that's happening downstairs in the Student Center 115. My dad used to sing in a barbershop group, and they would call it the Afterglow. So they'd have the party, or they'd have the show, and then the Afterglow. And then something else would happen, and then they'd come to our house for the Afterglow. I hated that. Right, anyway, this will be fun, and there may be barbershop music there too. There will be framed bookmarks to paint and a photo booth and mocktails. There's apparently a controversy brewing over the how to correctly make a Shirley Temple. Is it Sprite or is it ginger ale? Sprite. Oh, Olivia, I'm sorry, you fail. It can't be Sprite because, no, it just can't. It can be whatever you want it to be, right?
Even it hard enough.
Right, unless it's Sprite. Right. They're also, on your way out, please take a look at the t-shirts for sale, and there are some fantastic stickery type things. And there's also, I think, some editions of Eastern Exposure there for you to take, so please do, yes. Thank you all for coming. Good luck with your exams and papers if you've got them, and I hope to see you all, except those of you graduating, next year. Actually, if you want to come back and after you graduated, that's fine too, but it's all good. So thank you again. Have a wonderful night. Please join us downstairs in room 115, and have a great summer. Right? Take care, everyone.